happy Halloween. I'm gonna make a little bit of a different video today, and I will tell you some stories I found on Reddit. This is from a deleted user 8 years ago. I've shared this story before, and this still creeps me the hell out. Growing up, there was this girl who always freaked the fuck out of the other neighborhood kids. For example, she told all the girls that in the forest behind her house, there were dead, bloody people in it. All the kids freaked out and told their parents, which resulted in all the dads doing a search in the forest, only to find Hot Pocket wrappers and empty beer bottles. After that, all the neighborhood kids refused to go near her, including me. A few years later, my parents got a divorce. The day that the movers came to my dad's house to get my mom's stuff out, the girl comes out of nowhere. She said that Matt didn't like that my parents were getting a divorce. My dad ended up telling me that Matt was her imaginary friend that was often too physical. Even though I stopped being friends with her, her parents were still friends with my dad. Her parents told my dad that Matt could control the lights, even making the power go out one time. Matt also knocked on doors at night. But if he was ignored, the banging on the doors would start. 2 years after my parents' divorce, my dad decided that he would invite that whole family over to catch up. I was begging my dad not to, but he said it would be nice. So when they came over, my dad said to show the girl my bedroom, since I got a new TV. I show her to my room, and she is acting normal and complimenting my room. I was still creeped out because she just sat on the floor while I tried to put a movie into my DVD player. And I shit you not, but out of nowhere, mid-conversation, in the most deadpan voice, she said, "Matt's here." At that exact moment, the lights flickered, and I fucking ran out of my room crying. Her parents ran into my room and dragged their daughter out and went home. I refused to sleep in my bedroom for weeks after that. I haven't heard much from that family ever since then. I heard that Matt still controlled the lights, but I don't know if he's still around. Even to this day, when the lights flicker or a bulb breaks, I still freak out. Here is another story by also a deleted user 8 years ago. I've had a few strange experiences in my life, but here's one of the creepier ones I personally had. My parents live in a house built in the 1760s on the coast of southern Maine. It's a center chimney cape with a long L off the back. When they first purchased the house, I did some research on the property and the owners throughout the years. The house was built by the Eaton family and was handed down through the family from generation to generation until about 1860, when it was sold. Between 1820 and 1830, the Eaton family lost both parents and 8 of the 9 children to premature death. Most of them died of tuberculosis. I had returned home from college to stay with my parents during the winter break. January in Maine is bitter cold, and in 18th century house, all the more so. My little sister, who was about 15 at the time, and I were sharing a bed, partially for warmth, partially because I'm a sissy, and the damned old place has always creeped me out a bit. Bed was in a downstairs front room of the house. The only other person in the house at the time was my younger brother, who was in the back L, far across the house from us. I woke up around 8 a.m., rather abruptly, because I could hear intensely labored breathing coming from my sister. At first I thought she must have come down with a terrible cold and was really congested. I lay there for a couple of minutes and then finally rolled over to check on her because it sounded awful, like asthma attack or a death rattle. When I rolled over, I immediately saw she was on her side facing me, wide-eyed. She whispered, "That's not you." The noise continued, and it was loud. There was nothing supple about it, and it was coming from the bed, directly between us. We jumped out of bed, checked under the bed, checked the entire room, and while the breathing continued. Finally, at a loss, we just stood on either side of the bed, facing each other and listened in disbelief. It stopped abruptly. I have no explanation for that. My parents have owned the house for almost 10 years since then, and a variety of odd things have happened, though no one else has ever heard the labored breathing, which I rather think is just what it would sound like if, say, a person were dying of tuberculosis. The next story is from a user called Dable, also 8 years ago. I grew up on the west coast of Ireland, in County Galloway. One night when I was around 16 years of age, I woke up in the middle of a fucking gale, with rain pelting the windows and wind whistling through the cracks. One night, there was only myself and mother, and the sisters inside the house, as the father was away minding the cattle, due to it being calving season. Normally, I'd be helping him out, but not so on this night. We had these spotlights to illuminate the outside of the house, and one of the spotlights shone directly up into my window. And even with the curtains closed, it would lighten up the room. The shadows of branches and long blades of grass would project into the ceiling, and the gale being what it was caused a frantic wilderness to characterize this night's shadow play. I watched the shadows on the ceiling and listened to the wind roar outside for a short while. In fairness, though, I did need to go to the toilet, so I sat up to take off the blanket and looked over at the door. My view of the door was such that I couldn't from my bed see into the hallway unless the door was fully ajar. The door was only slightly cracked, but it was open enough to allow the width of a human arm. And there, extending into the room, was just that. The arm was pale white, and judging by the shape of the hand on the end of it appeared to be female. It had a classic shroud-like sleeve ending a few inches before the wrist. It waved palm side down for about 5 seconds and then retracted. Now the gale and the lights and the shadows and all that was bearable. Even the arm and hand could have been grand enough. I could have pegged it down to that sleep paralysis crack. But Jesus Christ, and the way that arm retracted back into the hallway. The way the door handle moved downwards as the arm retracted, and the way the fucking door slammed after it. Couldn't fucking breathe. The way the door closed horrified me. I began to roar and shout and managed to get the bedside lamp on and covers off and began running around the room, opening the door of the hallway into nothingness. Not a soul awake in the fucking house beside myself. I ran into my mother's room and told her about the event. She didn't believe me and just told me to shut up because I would wake my sisters. I calmed down and slept on the floor in my mother's room that night. Now that house had been built by my parents. No one had died in it. Nothing else even slightly paranormal happened in that house before or since. A few weeks later, though, I was talking to the neighbor, an old alcoholic bachelor who had lived in the area his entire life. I told him about the event, and his rarely smile got wider and he laughed. Well, sure, isn't that a bit of land your folks built that house on called Knockashy by the old people of the village? Sure. In Irish, doesn't that mean Hill of the Ferris? The last story I have here is from a user called YoBro88, 8 years ago. Well, a long time ago, about 7 years now, I was in my bed at my barracks and had an unexpected visitor. It was about 11 p.m. to about 12 a.m. I was awoken by a voice indistinct. I couldn't make out a coherent word. It was just garbled. I looked up and the sleepy and confused me thought someone was visiting my roommate and decided to bug me. For some reason, it's always funny to bother the sleeping guy. I grabbed my blanket and wrapped it around my waist. Upon realizing I was in my underwear, and when the light hit the figure speaking to me, it was a woman. Couldn't make out the face. She was medium build and with longer hair. Again she spoke. I could not register what she was saying. I was falling asleep as she spoke. I was often fatigued after work, so it was merely the sound of her voice waking me up. I glanced once again at the woman. I could not bring myself to attempt to talk to someone who was clearly just trying to annoy me. I apologized and told her I was just too tired and talk to me in the morning. I laid back down and nearly instantly was taken back by slumber. The next day, I realized that my roommate was on vacation and had been for a while. In my sleepy state, I'd forgotten this. And my door was dead bolted. Even if someone had the key, I needed to physically let them in. No clue who, what, it was, or what it wanted. I just know something woke me up and tried to speak to me. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you had a super good evening, good day, or good night. And as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want to hear more videos like this, with creepy stories or other things like this, please let me know. Thank you so much. Bye bye.